Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 67 of Teaching Tales, the podcast totally devoted to sharing stories from the world of education. I am your host, Brent Coley, an elementary principal in beautiful and very hot Southern California. We're recording in the summer right now, so we are in triple digits. Joining me today in also hot and humid conditions, Kristen Koppers. How are you, Kristen?
I am great. How are you?
I am super. I know that it's summertime and you guys are enjoying a swim day with the kids. I appreciate you taking a little time out to share some stories about something that you're passionate about. But before we jump in, go ahead and let any listeners know, who is Kristen Koppers?
Well, I am a wife, a mother, a daughter, a teacher, an educator, all of the above. I do live in Illinois. It is hot and humid. The temperature actually went up to about 88 degrees, but that doesn't include our heat index. I think we'll be at about 95, 99 on Saturday. So the kids are swimming. But I'm a national board certified teacher. I certified in 2009, just after my son was born, and I did renew it. So I will find out in November, December this year if I do have that to go with. I won several different awards out here, the Everyday Hero, where with all my volunteering that I do, with the kids, with the community. I'm part of a lot of nonprofit organizations. I write a lot. So there's a lot of different parts of me that you may or may not see, whether it's online or just at home. But I'm very passionate about teaching and what I teach my students on an everyday basis.
Awesome. Well, congrats on your national board certification. I've got a couple teachers who went through that process, and that's not a small thing.
No, it takes a long time. I mean, you got to start preparing a couple years in advance if this is what you want to do, because I spent probably about 45 plus hours just on renewal.
Yeah. No, seeing what our teachers had to do in terms of the qualifications and the things that had to create and submit was it was not for the faint of heart. So congrats on that. So, well, and I know that you mentioned, you're in the classroom, which is awesome. And one of the things that you are passionate about, you recently published on this, is differentiated instruction, which I know, which classroom teachers, administrators, anyone in education, we hear that word a lot. I know when I was in the classroom, we heard that a lot, and we know the importance of it, how important it is to differentiate. That is, many will call it a buzzword, but it's so much more than that, because it's legit. One size doesn't fit all in teaching. We've got, how many students do you typically have in one of your classes?
I teach high school level, so secondary ed. I have sophomores and seniors, so I can teach anywhere from a class of 27 to 33 for 5 hours a day, roughly about 140 kids.
Wow. Yeah. And to think that anywhere between 27 and 33 kids are all at exactly the same level is, it's just ridiculous. it's not possible. And even if you cut that number in half or by a third, even if you had 6 or 7 kids only, they're not all going to be working at the same level. So Kristen, do me a favor. How did, I know you're passionate about this. Enough that you recently published a book on this. Why differentiate instruction? What's your story behind this?
So differentiate instruction, quite a few years ago, this is one of the methods that we incorporated to the school on differentiating a unit. And I was one of the team leaders on this. And we did a drama unit where we would make different assignments for different levels of students. So if a teacher had a lower level of a student, then they can use one worksheet. If they had a higher level, then the students can use a different worksheet. The problem with that is you'd have several different worksheets for just the one assignment alone.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was, instead of differentiating the instruction for all students, we just differentiate the instruction for the teachers. So you can reach all students in different ways with the same assignment instead of trying to come up with, 27 different assignments or 140 different assignments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's just, it's not manageable. And you'll get many that'll say like, well, and worksheet's not the answer anyway. And yeah, like you said, 27 different worksheets, or I'm just going to cross these problems off on this worksheet. I mean, that's not the answer. So when you say like differentiating the instruction from the teacher's perspective, what do you mean? Like what would that look like in your room, for example?
So what I do is I first obviously find out where my students are in my class. It's like a pre-assessment. When you look at differentiated instruction, you're looking at the aspects of what can you change so all students can learn. And Carol Ann Tomlinson, she actually is one of the founders that started all this, is that pre-assessments are a good way to determine where students are at in your specific classroom. So after we do that, then I try to differentiate how I explain something. So we have learners that are higher level, we have learners that are at the regular base, and then we have lower level learners that have a harder time understanding certain concepts. So in the book, there are several different ways of doing this. So when we start a novel, I always give an intro to the novel with the author's biography, historical events that happened around that novel during that time. So students are aware of why the novel was written and why there are certain events or situations that happen within that novel. Mm-hmm. Once we get into the novel more, there's a couple different things I do. Students who like to read on their own, they usually will go in the hall and read quietly. If a student needs an audio, I'll play the audio in class. Or there is a time where students want to read together in small groups, and then they'll be in different parts of the room or a hallway. This way, they're choosing their own method of learning, because we all know that if I play an audio, some students will fall asleep or not pay attention. If they read on their own, they may be, daydreaming. So giving them an option of how they want to learn definitely engages the student.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. So beyond that, like, can you give me like a success story, for example, with something that you've seen, a way that you've done something in your classroom and how it's benefited either one particular student or multiple students?
So creating interdisciplinary units is also a great way to differentiate your instruction. I am not a math major. I'm horrible at math. The students can testify to that. So one year, the students read To Kill a Mockingbird their freshman year. Their sophomore year, we were able to go see a play at our local university. And so what I did was create a lesson from the book that they read freshman year to the play that they saw sophomore year. And then I related it to history and math. And of course, me being an English teacher, I had to relearn math, which was the triangle inequality theorem. And if anybody knows math, it's not an easy theorem to understand. So I coordinated it with a couple of teachers on my floor. And the triangle inequality theorem states that the sum of two sides has to be greater than the third in order to form a triangle. So if you think about it this way, if one side is 3, one side is 4, then that has to be greater than the third. And if you have the third is 5, then 3 plus 4 is 7, which is greater than 5. And students, they'll start understanding that. But when you start throwing characters in there, then you have an issue of, what do I mean? So this is how I understood the triangle inequality theorem and explained it to my students. There are 3 main characters in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird: Atticus Finch, Bob Ewell, and Tom Robinson. And obviously history plays an important part in there, because during this time it was the pre-civil rights movement, where any man was tried by an all-white jury of men, and that the African Americans did not have a fair trial no matter what. So we placed Atticus Finch on one side, and on the other side, we placed Tom Robinson. And then on the third side, which would be side C, we placed Bob Ewell. So there, the students would have to determine if Atticus Finch plus Tom Robinson is greater than Bob Ewell. And then they had to write a synthesis paragraph on that, explaining not only the triangle inequality theorem, but then explaining the relation between the characters.
Wow. Definitely deeper than what would your traditional assignment or something like that, like describe the character or something like that. And I love the cross discipline nature of that. I mean, as an English teacher, bringing math in, I think the higher up we go, traditionally we see less and less of that. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. There's very little interdisciplinary units made. It is harder to do, but I don't think that a lot want to go to create all that, but I'm one who does. I do it all the time. And I think that the more you connect other courses, students are engaged more and they see the value of those other courses.
Yeah. Well, and just like in life, things are not always compartmentalized. It's not like, all right, math stops at 10:28 today and now language start. I mean, it's like things mesh in real life. It's that we don't live like that. So I want to go back. You had mentioned choice at the beginning, and I think, and you also mentioned teachers a lot of times they don't want, and I interpret that to mean like they don't have the time or to create all of those things. I think giving the choice, like you said, that is an easier way to provide, because you're just going to lead to increased engagement if you give kids choice. Like you said, just back at the beginning, do you want to listen to it? Do you want to read it in a group, or do you want to read it by yourself? I mean, when you do that, what are your kids' responses?
I give them all three responses at first to have them make a choice, because if I say you want to go to the hall, of course, all the students are like, oh, I want to go in the hall, but I have to make sure that they're following through with what they're doing. And I do check on them. I go in the hallway, I walk around. I don't just sit at my desk and, do nothing. I kind of sit myself to where I can hear them in the hallway or see them. And then I can also listen to the audio. It depends on the groups. If there's a larger group that wants to read out loud, and there's a smaller group that wants to listen to an audio, I send them the audio link, and then they can listen to that in the hallway. So it depends on the group sizes of where they're at. But I myself am a visual learner, so I have to see things in order to understand it. And sometimes I have to hear things to understand it. So I would read along by listening to the audio. And I know some students can. I also know some students can't, and the audio deters their way of learning.
Absolutely. I saw on Twitter the other day, and it kind of reminded me, I said, I think this could tie into the conversation I'm going to have with Kristen, it was a teacher who had tweeted something out, and it kind of goes along with that choice. And as a language arts teacher, I want to see what your take would be on this. She had her students, because your kids read multiple books over the course of a school year. So, for example, you've mentioned To Kill a Mockingbird and things like that. She had her students at the end of the unit, or excuse me, at the end of the year, create Netflix posters, for lack of a better term. So for anyone listening, I mean, Kristen, are you a Netflix subscriber?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so when you go on to Netflix, so anyone listening, you picture when you're scrolling through and you see that when it fills up the whole screen and you've got like an image of the movie or the television show, and on the left-hand side, it says like a Netflix original, it's got the rating, and then you have a little synopsis of the show, or if you go deeper, the episode. You know how you click or you tap or you select the show, and then it'll show like the episode listing with a little thumbnail and the summary of that episode to the right of the thumbnail. Are you following me?
Yep.
I'm visualizing it, but we had her students create those like in Google Slides, could be done in PowerPoint, could be done in Google Google Drawings. She had her students create a Netflix style poster based on the book, one of the books that they read. And I thought, oh my gosh, what an engaging, technology infused way to have students report on one of the favorite books that they read. And she didn't, and I retweeted this, and I kind of followed some of the thread of what people were saying, and they were saying, like, do you have a template? Do you have a template that you could share with me? And the teacher, her response was, no, I don't, because I didn't want to limit the kids. And she was working with, I think, 8th graders. So they would have a bit of tech savvy there. It would be a little harder I'm at an elementary level. I would probably want to give them a little more, but she's like, I didn't want to limit them. I gave them very few parameters because I wanted to see what they would come up with by themselves. I mean, what can you see something like that working with your students?
So I did something similar to that when we read 1984. We talked about propaganda and, how we see it everywhere on TV, ads, commercials, even stadiums now.
Mm-hmm.
The Chicago stadiums are now being taken over by corporations. I mean, to me, Comiskey Park will always be Comiskey Park. I won't know it by any other name because that's how I grew up. So what we did was we used Poster My Wall at the time, and they had to create a propaganda poster based on, I guess we call it today's world. And then they had to focus on a saying that they created that would change someone's view of something, to understand how propaganda can change someone's mindset. Mm-hmm. It's hard for students to understand dystopian novels, especially with 1984, because they don't understand if someone tells you it's going to happen, they're like, well, no, it's not. But you don't have that choice. And that's the thing. If I take away your choice, you have to do it. And that's the hard thing the students to understand. So for me to differentiate the teaching in that way, I have to bring in things that they know. Mm. So if I told them that they can't eat fast food anymore because it's not allowed and it's illegal, and they said they're going to do it, there's consequences, and the consequences are drastic. And so that starts to get them to understand, and it's not a worksheet where I have to do 140 different ones. I change the way I introduce or teach it to have students understand what I'm trying to get through the novel.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same type of thing, when you have when it's more open-ended, the assignment is open-ended, you can differentiate the teaching to the levels of those students, and then they have more freedom to express. I think that's the thing that I'm very passionate about, is expressing. One of the things that we're going to be working on this year with our teachers is having those opportunities to express their learning, not be as one-dimensional or as cookie cutter, in a box, literally like a diorama type thing, because there's just more engaging, more open-ended ways for students to demonstrate what they've learned, like that poster that you had your students create, or the Netflix posters that this teacher's 8th graders created. And I looked at some of them, and I showed my wife last night. I kind of pulled up Twitter and pulled up those images and showed her, and she's like, "Are those real?" I mean, they looked like something you would see on Netflix. I mean, it was very, very impressive. And I think that's a testament to not limiting our students.
Right. And part of the other thing is the students want to know that their work is authentic. It's not just they're turning it into you for a grade, because I found that students don't work their best if it's just turned into me. Mm-hmm. So one of my other interdisciplinary units that I did a few years back is that our chorus musical was Into the Woods, which is an awesome musical.
My daughter loved that musical.
And we read Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. We also read earlier in the year Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So what I wanted to do was I met with the choir director, and he was all for it. And the students had to use metamorphosis from a character or something from the novel and metamorphosize it into the woods aspect. And that's some of the pictures that are illustrated in the current book that came out. For instance, Abigail, our first place winner, and I actually had all these pictures of all their work online through a website, and people would vote on it from the public. It was a public site, and then we had about 573 votes.
Nice.
And so she used the magic beans that Jack had, and it started to slowly transform into the knives that killed Santiago Nassar.
Wow.
And then another student, Emily, she got second place of her drawing. She had Rapunzel that on one side, and then the other half of the face was Davina from the novel. So they had the same characteristics. They had to also explain it, not just draw it, but explain how they metamorphosized and in what way. So it wasn't just a drawing, but they had and then we would talk about it in class. And then on the 3-night production of the musical, all their artwork was displayed for the public to see.
And that's awesome. And I can only imagine the pride that those students felt. Because again, what you said about when their work is not just for a grade, when it's going to be seen by the public, I go back to something that Rushton Hurley has said, and many people have said it, but it resonates and it has stuck with me, that if I always butcher, I don't get it right every time, but it's something along the lines of, if students know their teacher is going to see it, they want it to be good enough. If they know the world's going to see it, they want it to be good. If they're turning in that essay to you, and I'm sure you've gotten that question. I know I did when I taught. It's, how many paragraphs does it have to be? How many pages does it have to be? It's they want it to be good enough. But if you tell them, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're putting this on the website and people are going to vote on this. They don't just want it to be good enough. They want it to be good. And I can only imagine your students when like your winner, when, wow, I got this many votes. People across the country saw this. Or I visualize the students who made those Netflix posters. If those students knew that I was showing my wife last night and we were like, oh my gosh, those are fantastic. Or if they knew that I'm talking about this in a podcast right now, I mean, how cool would that be for the students?
And I had to actually contact a few of them because they had to sign off on their release, and they couldn't believe that after 4 years after graduating that I contacted them saying that their work was going to be in my book. They were like extremely happy to the fact that I remembered them, took the time to contact them and explain what I was doing with it.
That's fantastic. That is just super cool. So as we close, so you've mentioned your book. So let people know what's the name of your book. How could they get a copy of your book? What's the book about? What are they going to find in it?
So the book is called Differentiated Instruction in the Teaching Profession. It's innovative ways to change how we teach. Not necessarily what we teach, and it's not going against standards or creating a new curriculum, but it's using what you have to make sure that you change your teaching methods so all students can learn. In the book, there are several different chapters. The first chapter is where it all began of how I started teaching, because honestly, I didn't go out to be a teacher at first. I was a reporter, I was a writer, I worked for a newspaper. It wasn't until years later that I went back for my master's in English and got my teaching certificate. Then I used collaboration on how to learn to collaborate with other teachers, even through the internet, even having students collaborate with each other, using breakout boxes. I was really inspired by Carrie Baucom's sketchnoting, and that's in there too, about different ways to take notes, because we all can't take notes the same way. Students like to doodle, and it's been proven that they're actively engaged. Even if they're not writing down everything, they're still writing something. So there's a couple examples in there. I talk about the interdisciplinary units that I've done. and some ideas about and perspectives of how we see things. The kids know every year, I'll tell them beginning that I can prove 2 + 2 = 5 logically, maybe not mathematically, but logically. And they have to wait till October for me to do that because that's part of 1984's novel. And they always challenge me on it, and that's in the book too, explaining the mathematical equation of how to see it from a different perspective. And that's the key word is the perspective aspect. And using 2 and 2 = 5, it's been proven. And kids will call me on it, but they do enjoy the fact that they use critical thinking skills, which is really what we want our students to do, because that's what they're going to need after graduation.
Absolutely. Well, and they could pick that book up on Amazon?
On Amazon.com, even through EduMatch Publishing. There is a Kindle version. There is a print version as of right now. But yes, they always pick it up there. And then I have a book signing coming up in Shorewood, Illinois on July 23rd at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., which I'll have a few copies there as well as some T-shirts.
Awesome. Well, I've ordered my copy. I ordered it last night, so it's on the way. And I like what you said there about it's not going against the standards. It's not changing what we have to teach. It's changing how we teach, because we as teachers know it's like there's certain things that are mandated. You've got to cover this. And what I heard you say there, without saying the words, it's like we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're changing the way we do things, what we already do, to make it better. So reminds me of Weston Kieschnick's take on blended learning. It's like, if you're a master direct instruction teacher, don't get rid of that. Let's see if we can use technology to make it better. So awesome. Kristen, thank you so much for taking the time to share. Hopefully, I know I got something out of this. Hopefully folks did as well.
I thank you so much, Brent, for letting me come on and talk about it. I'm extremely happy with the book, and I hope others are too.
Awesome. Yep, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on a copy. And for everyone listening, thank you. Thank you for tuning in, for taking about 30 minutes to listen. I appreciate it. As always, you can subscribe to the podcast, and then you'll have new episodes automatically delivered to your podcast catcher. We're in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. Wherever you find your podcast, you can do it there. We're on Spotify as well. And until next time, have a good one.